Very good. Large-scale wind and solar proliferation in New York State. I like an octopus here because, as you'll hear from me and from other speakers, this thing just has so many legs and so many arms. This is really, it's very difficult to keep, to get a hold of it, and for our small communities, it's even more difficult. And of course, that's not going to work, so that's okay. This is me, I'm boring. If you want to leave that, you can read it later. Climate change is real, but our laws fail to address it equitably or adequately. Our laws enable and enrich incompetent, often aggressive, and often out-of-state or foreign developers. And they'll destabilize the electric grid by relying on wind and solar, targets low-income rural communities, and provides little economic benefit, and will fundamentally change the way that we do business. These are Mick and Joe. These are operatives for the wind and solar companies, and they look out across our landscape, and they only see opportunity for themselves. So why are developers coming to New York? We're vulnerable. We have a lot of elderly. We tend to be law-abiding. We tend to be independent thinkers, and we trust authority. And many landowners are struggling financially. Our municipalities don't have the wherewithal, I hate to say it that way, we don't have the tools, we don't have the stuff available to us to actually fight these large corporations, awful multinationals. They're primarily small towns. We lack the expertise, and it costs a bunch of money to hire people to fight it. We lack the funds, and the state mandated funds are insufficient. And land, believe it or not, is relatively inexpensive compared to other parts of the country. And we're a transmission and transportation corridor. Here we are right on Route 20. Beautiful firehouse, by the way, and thank you again for letting this be here. But Route 20 is a transportation corridor that's been used for centuries now. And it's also where they like to run power lines. It's about greed, not green. Make that a hashtag, I do. Rural New York is proper opportunity. They see they'll come in, they'll tell us about the jobs they're gonna create, the tax dollars they're gonna bring us, while at the same time, tens of billions, literally tens of billions of New York ratepayer and taxpayer dollars are being used for construction, to pay for renewable energy certificates, which we pay for again, right? Because the state requires our utility companies to buy renewable energy certificates, and then they pass on us, and for the energy produced. And then New York State actually mandates property tax discounts, and the processes limit local input from municipalities and from our folks. And then the feds, of course, have kicked in, at least through July of next year. Developers, they will tell you cash infusion, short-term construction jobs. They taught these jobs are just short-term, the construction jobs. They're gonna appeal to emotions. They'll say, you're gonna make a difference. And then they talk about agrivoltaics, which I come from the computer field. We had something called vaporware, which referred to, IT guy, right? Which referred to, software that didn't, or hardware that didn't exist yet. Agrivoltaics at the same spot. They don't really exist in any real form. And every acre then that's paved with glass and steel, cement and fiberglass means fewer farm jobs, fewer equipment dealers, fewer farm supply dealers. If they're not plowing the land and planting crops, they can't be, they don't need equipment. Reduced property values in tourism, I don't know, do you want to go apple picking next to a wind turbine? Abandoned homesteads, fewer opportunities for residents and businesses, and the lease agreements themselves, if they're done right, if the company didn't screw over the leaseholder, if they're done right, they only help enrich that individual landowner, and they're looking at land in Florida, right? So how are these things cited? There's actually two paths within New York State on how to cite a large, an industrial scale wind or solar. So utility scale is considered 1 megawatt or more. So you'll see a lot that are 1 megawatt up to now 25 megawatts. And those are actually cited through your local planning board, your code enforcement officer, and perhaps, depending on how your zoning, if you have zoning, is written, it may have to go to the zoning board of appeals. They're direct funded in whole or in part, by NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority, or two tax credits from New York State and the feds. We've seen that they often are paid at project completion. I had a friend who said the one that near her, she looked it up, NYSERDA wrote them a check the day after they went live. Boom, boom, all done. Don't have to produce any electricity, got the check, right? And they might be supported by pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes. And those are, used by economic development agencies and also by towns and school districts. If it's more than 25 megawatts, used to be 20, now it's up to 25, they are cited by the Office of Renewable Energy and Electric Transmission Siting. They used to just be energy, so they're still known by ORES. We call it ORES. And so those projects, go through the ORES process. And we have back at our table a little bit more about the ORES process. That's our Stop Energy Sprawl table back there, and what actually happens there. And I think we'll answer more questions about it. The main takeaway from that is that there are only two parties in the ORES process: the Office of Renewable Energy Siting and the company. Everybody else has to apply to be a party. So our municipalities, our citizens have no voice unless we make a big enough argument. And guess what? You make a big enough argument, you gotta spend a lot of money, you gotta get experts, you gotta get that sort of thing. So the funding for those projects comes through NYSERDA. Yearly awards of billions of ratepayer dollars since 2017. NYSERDA is actually funded by state ratepayers. I can show you on your bill where you help pay for NYSERDA. And how NYSERDA pays them, they pay them for the production and the RECs, the energy credits that we talked about before. And pilots and host agreements come into play here. A lot of these companies will go and they'll basically talk to your IDA and say, look, you have to help us out because we're gonna give you lots of jobs. Why? Well, concerns about climate change and public pressure to reverse it converts to votes, right? So if you're concerned and you're in an area where a lot of folks are concerned, and you can say, hey, look at me, I'm doing something about it. I'm doing wind and solar. Then that could convert to votes. We need to change that mindset because wind and solar doesn't help us. The argument is it utilizes energy that we already have, the sun, the wind, but ignores the massive build out required and this potential scarcity of the materials to build the facilities, which by the way have to be mined using gas and oil and actually shipped to this country using gas and oil, and then manufactured using gas and oil, and then transported to the site using gas and oil. But yeah, it's gonna reduce greenhouse gases. Ignores intermittency. That's the fact that you aren't creating energy when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. It ignores the failures in Germany and California, which I suspect Keith is going to talk about a little bit. And it ignores hydropower, which we're not that far from Niagara County, another couple hours down the road. We've all been to the falls, and I hope, and seen the big hydro plant there. And it virtually ignores nuclear as well, which is much less land intensive. And ignores the rights, and much more reliable. And ignores the rights of the communities they want to voice this upon, right? And also ignores that wind and solar doesn't really work well in upstate New York. I mean, let's face it. Yeah, here on the wind side, the purple areas, that's where we got the best winds in the country. That's not New York State. And then on the solar side, the only place that's worse than upstate New York is Alaska. So, I stole that line from Keith. So this is our Stop Energy Sprawl website. It says climate change is real. New York's climate action plan is not. And we'll talk a little bit about the legislation. I have this here because everything bad happens to the budget. Most of the climate legislation is stuff that they snuck into the budget, right? Because everybody's in a hurry, we gotta get the budget done. Oh, do this, oh, okay, well, let's do this, right? New York lawmakers use cover budget for most of the energy plan. There are multiple pieces of legislation. We're gonna talk about them, and they give us a lot of reasons that don't bear up under really intense scrutiny, or only partially do. They talk about better health comes forward. They talk about reduced costs, which we really haven't seen. They talk about economic development. They talk that it helps disadvantaged communities. And they'll tell us that wind and solar will be able to meet demand. It does not. I live in a disadvantaged community, and we're targeted for a very large solar project, and it will not help us. It'll ruin our economy. So, the first one I want to talk about is RPTL 487, RPTL, Real Property Tax Law 487. Wow, that's hard to see up there. So, wind and solar facilities are exempt from property taxes. And let me see if I can lower the brightness here, if that'll help. No? Okay. So, municipalities can opt out of RPTL 487 or require a pilot. Pilots can't be more than what you could collect in taxes. Well, that's great, except that municipalities aren't the best ones at figuring out what their taxes are going to be out for the next 20 years, right? So how do you set a pilot in that case? It doesn't talk about host community benefit agreements. And funny enough, if you get a notice of attack and you don't respond, bing, 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 it's free to the company. This happened in Clay, New York, not too long ago, not too far from here, right? Loss of $800,000 in tax revenue because local officials failed to respond in time to the notices from the developer. I'm going really fast because I want to be good on time here. Then the next one that came was the Accelerated Renewable Siting, and that's known as 94C. It's now known as Article 8. Created ORES, and says that ORES has the sole discretion, as we talked about, to site these electric plants without, a built-in community portion. It can dismiss local laws. You had a local law? That's great. Isn't it great for you? You had a local law, but it's unreasonably burdensome to the company and to the state's plans, so we're going to override it. And it preempts, so there's no local representation, it preempts environmental review under seeker. They built their own seeker. Why? I don't know. And then it limits application review to 1 year, otherwise the project is automatically approved. And my one point on that is that this is a brand new agency, it's only been around a few years. I doubt they're actually fully staffed up, and they've been rushing lately to get everything done. So what kind of quality review is happening if they have to rush through them in order to get everything done within a year? And it removes our home rule, obviously, by overriding our laws. This is what the Small Business Association had to say about it. Eliminating home rule entirely to promote green energy could exacerbate, easy for me to say, New York's ever-present upstate, downstate, rural-urban divides. The CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. They created the Climate Action Council that was put together a plan, the Climate Action Plan, and it was mostly state agency heads. So those are, appointees of the governor. No rural New York representative. There was one guy who actually represented the Adirondacks, but I'm not sure he was actually from the Adirondacks originally. And that's not really indicative of the rest of rural New York. And no utility consumer advocate. I don't even think Polk was on the committee, the Public Utility Law Project. Defines the Climate Action Plan set goals for renewables, wind and solar, and carbon-free generation. They failed to protect upstate ag and tourist economies. The plan failed to address transition for farm workers. They talked about transitioning guys pumping gas into other roles, but not farm workers. And they failed to adequately plan for a reliable grid. So this is a slide that I borrowed. and it's the about the CLCPA, and this shows what our grid looked like in 2019. It was about 40% fossil fuels. It was over 50% between hydro and nuclear, greenhouse gas emission free generation, and a little bit of wind and solar. And in 2022, and so, no, here's the plan, sorry, I got the wrong one here. So the plan calls for 70% renewable, so that little, like 4% that we got in 2019, by 2030, that's gonna be almost 3/4 of our grid, right? And then, who knows what the other 30% is, right? And then in 2040, it's supposed to be 100% carbon free. You'll notice that these pie charts are getting just a little bigger from time to time because electricity usage is growing. So what we really see is in 2050, it's a much larger pie, and requires an 85% reduction in statewide greenhouse gas emissions. So what does that mean practically to our communities? That means that every year, 22 square miles of land needs to be covered with for solar. This is just solar alone, and most of it is farmland. The farmland alone is about as much as covering the entire island of Manhattan, and then replicating that 21 more times around the city.
I'd be fine with just covering Manhattan.
I actually mentioned.
I mean, they're doing hydro right now anyway, because the sewers are all backed up.
Yeah, and each of these bullets is in the and. So we need that solar, and we need 2,000 plus wind turbines of onshore wind. That's a new wind turbine every 5 days. And we need another 1,700 turbines of offshore wind, also a new turbine every 5 days. So here's what I was trying to talk to earlier. This is the tale of two grids. In 2022, we have in upstate New York, which is all those lighter blue areas. I grew up in Schenectady, so I'm not sure. I think that Zone F is downstate, but I mean, I know a lot of folks think, the farther west you go, the more Albany looks like downstate to everybody. So I do understand that. So, yeah. So upstate, we're already pretty much greenhouse gas free, and downstate is where the issue is. And where are they trying to build all these facilities? That's right. Basically, A through F. That's where the majority are going. And of course, the offshore wind off of Long Island and lakes, Lake Erie there. So a couple more pieces of legislation, because our real problem is the state legislature, and that's where we need to change this, right? So RPTL 575B gave more incentives. Like, these guys didn't have enough incentives to come here to New York State to begin with. Gave more incentives, and then Schoharie sued, and the legislature said, no, the heck with you, County of Schoharie. We're just gonna, write a law around your lawsuit. And then also in 2023, NYPA, the New York Power Authority, was directed, well, if the private sector isn't working fast enough, you should use your public funds and build more wind and solar. In 2024, we got the RAPID Act, and that gives ORAs the authority to site transmission facilities, and it lowers the bar for eminent domain. So that's, we can talk a lot more about the RAPID Act. They've actually re-released new regulations after a whole bunch of us put in a lot of comments, and they ignored all our comments. So we're going to be putting more comments in. And then the Schoharie County sued again, and so the legislature passed another law to try to go around that. But we've all made a lot of noise about this law. It's S8012, and the governor has not called for it yet. So if you end up talking to the governor, tell her please veto it or don't call for it. We're pretty happy about that. So. And yes, all those with the budget, 5 of them, all have in the budget. And, you know, and rural communities, as a result of this, are not fairly compensated. So these solar companies get like 75% off their taxes, compared to industrial facilities of equal value. So what are municipalities doing? You know, we see commonly that municipalities are looking to protect farmland and their ag economies, prioritize their local laws, their local options, ensure equitable treatment from the state, and you know that means participating in the ORS process to the extent that it's allowed, and trying to find ways to make it a bad idea if someone wants to come in and convert farmland. They're improving their solar and wind laws. We have a sample solar law. We want to get a sample wind law out on our website. They're doing moratoria until they actually have, to give them time to actually work on these laws and make sure that they are effective. And I want to note a couple of things for you. Niagara County, and I have the law back at the table, is the first county government to require recycling for solar panels. That's a pretty gosh darn important thing, and you know, it's fairly recent. I don't know how it's working. I want to find out more about that, but it's really important, and it's worth a read of the law. The town of Glenville, in suburban Schenectady actually, you know, requires a public benefit fee to be assessed on all solar facilities. Montgomery County is first county to do a cumulative impact law that says, if you come into our county and you propose, yep, thank you, a large scale facility, you have to tell us what the impact is on those others. So, let's see. And Skihari, we talked about the lawsuits for Skihari, so we'll talk about that. So, are there any other things that have been changing? Yeah, state energy planning is moving away from just wind and solar, but not fast enough. We gotta keep the pressure up. We gotta make them know that they need to look at a diverse set of solutions. Upstate lawmakers of both parties are making noise because they're hearing from their constituents, and that's the most important thing that you can do. And the legal challenges are increasing. On the bad side, the red ones, NYSERDA refuses to publish the bid results for large-scale renewables. Yeah, I don't get that. I mean, I used to work for the state. Okay, you do a bid, you tell everybody what the bids are and why you awarded it. You don't keep it secret. But they're not gonna tell you until the facility is actually up and running. And ORS has been moving faster, and DPS is changing some things too. What can you do? This is the important part. Learn, check your comprehensive plan and other local laws, learn about the projects, and make comments. Learn about the company, that's important, and their LLCs and their partners, the amount of interweaving with these companies and who buys what and what buys whom is really pretty amazing when you get into it. Get involved and make noise. Run for office, not against any of the guys who are here, but you know, run for office. Volunteer for your planning board. You know, most stuff comes to the planning board first, and that's a good way to find out what's going on. And attend those meetings. Go to your planning board meeting, go to your town, village, county, school board. Hear what's being presented and hear what the companies are saying. And make sure that the companies aren't giving their pitch in executive session. That doesn't fly, okay? Engage neighbors and relatives, start a group. Yay, it looks good. We got a couple of groups here, excellent. And fight back on state and federal laws. You know, contact your U.S. elected officials. They've said that anything to get federal tax credits has to have work done by July 2026. Let's make sure it stays that way. About your neighbor. That worked in Copeg. The developer was an idiot and lost track of the releases and didn't tell ORES. And so people in the community got together, they bought out the farm, and they said, well, we're not interested in continuing this lease. It works. And come see our page. Lather, rinse, and repeat. It's not a one-time done. Look at your comprehensive plan. We won't go into this for time. how to submit a public comment to OLRES. I think Anita's gonna talk about this quite a bit more, so we'll, pro tip, use a text editor and then copy and paste, because DPS, uses a really old character set, so all of your hyphens and quotation marks end up looking like strange characters, so. So I think we talked a lot about this. Your group doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be, a 501c3 or 501c4. It can be social media only or web only. Conduct events like this one. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Anita. Excellent. Send mailers to your neighbors. This was one that we used on a sign or a mailer. I can't remember which. You can't eat solar panels. It was really popular, and we got a lot of feedback on that. And letters, postcards, emails to officials. Remember, if you send them paper, it's worth more than if you send them an email, okay? Because you get an assemblyman or a member of the Senate, and they get 5 postcards. That's a big deal. Okay, all about the same subject. Try to make the words different. Otherwise they think, oh yeah, it just went down to the photocopier, right? And then lastly, we're going to talk just slightly quickly around Stop Injury Sprawl. We're a grassroots all-volunteer coalition of 40 plus, maybe 50 plus at this point, I think, since we did this slide. Community groups, municipalities, and elected officials from around the state, targeted by land wasting and coastal injury, large-scale wind and solar, far from where that injury is needed. And all those little blue dots are, coalition organizations. We do outreach, like this talk, and we have a website and provide assistance with local laws, and we do a lot of regulatory comments to DPS and the state. So check out our website, and that's the last slide. And if you want to take, if you're feeling really flush this winter, and take a picture of the QR code and send us a happy gram. So. Thank you very much, and I'll get out of the way now. So.